Thanks. All right. Thanks, guys. Today, my hope for you all is that we literally solve your number one problem. And your number one problem is that you or people you rely on make hiring mistakes. And bad things happen when you make hiring mistakes. This topic is growing in popularity. The Wall Street Journal wrote that the topic of hiring is, and I quote, the most important aspect of business. The Economist ran a cover story piece on this topic, proclaiming it the issue for global business. And my favorite one was, Tom Peters wrote a blog on our Who book and said, this is a big damn deal. Finally, we have a solution to this problem. So I need your help today. It's going to go quickly. I need your engagement. As Craig mentioned, I'd love questions as we go. But my plan for you today is to give you a simple solution to your number one problem. And this isn't academic. Just ask Nate Thompson. Nate Thompson's not here, but Nate Thompson was in my audience a few years ago, and he had sweat pouring down his face. And he had a BlackBerry in one hand and another phone in another hand. And he looked a little stressed out. And on break, I came over to Nate. I said, Nate, how's business? And he said, it's a strain, honestly. I said, why is it a strain? This is even pre-recession. He said, it's a strain because I have hired and fired, then hired, then fired, then hired, then fired, then hired, then fired 5 heads of sales in the last 3 years. And I can't even go on vacation because I'm too busy doing the work of the folks in the department where I keep having these hiring problems. And I felt like helping Nate, and we did. He sat through and participated in an event just like this one, learned the method, went on to hire his last head of sales who ended up performing very well. It's a personal thing. It's a financial thing. It's a career thing. If you can get good at this skill, this one skill, I have hope that you will enjoy your careers more. You will make more money. And you'll have more time. That's the unexpected benefit of getting good at this one skill. Imagine if you could hire people with such certainty that they actually do their jobs really well and require less monitoring, less management, less entrepreneurial micromanagement, which we entrepreneurs occasionally get accused of. It's better. I've used the method personally in building my YPO-sized company. I know it works. But in coming here today, what we've prepared for you is special. It's a very simple model that will allow you to get it right. Has anyone here seen what happens when you get hiring wrong? So I told you about Nate and all of his sweat. What does it look like, when you get hiring wrong? So because it's important that together as this body, we conclude that this topic is worthy, and then we'll spend the whole rest of the time working the solution. So who's brave enough to stand up and either have a big voice or grab a mic and tell me, what does it look like when you make a hiring mistake? What are the costs? Immense costs. Well, not that you've ever made one, Craig, but when one happens, what are the costs? Like, what does it look like?
It's a distraction for the organization. You're in the ditch. You're investing time and energy into something that will perhaps pay no dividends.
Yeah, hopelessness, pain, distraction factor. Who's got a juicy story about a hiring mistake that's cost them? Yes, sir. Nice and loud.
I am a physician, and I hired staff, and I thought she was great. I was taking care of her.
Yes.
And she was doing all my billing and insurance. Well, she was making deals on the side with the patient saying, I'll double bill the insurance on the doctor's license.
Oh.
And when we get a check, I'll cut that check to you, and you cut me a check for half of what we do the insurance for.
Kickbacks and corruption are the costs. Thank you for that. Nice. Nice. Thank you. How about another one? What does it look like? Hiring mistake. A real one.
Geoff,
Yes, sir.
I hired an office manager. He took a credit card out in my name and went to the casinos and withdrew cash every week for about 6 weeks.
Was that part of the business plan? I mean, I know times are desperate. So we have the person took out a credit card and went to the casino and bet on it. We had another guy up here. Where is it? Yes, sir.
I have a machine shop. I hired a machinist. I have 22 employees. Hired a guy, great machinist, did his job very well, but he was so destructive verbally, he had the rest of my employees literally fist fighting. Very, very costly bad mistake.
Fist fights on the job are a cost of bad hiring. It doesn't have to be this way. But why is it this way? Let's spend a quick moment on why do we have problems hiring? Why is it rampant? I studied with Peter Drucker, the famous management writer, and his research and other research across a whole century suggests that managers make hiring mistakes about half the time. And for those of you who are here with your YPO or YEO bosses, it wasn't you, it was the other half of the senior team that didn't show up today, just to be entirely clear. But it's a 50% failure rate. 50% failure rate, 50% failure rate is the common norm for hiring success. In our previous line of research on the top grading work, some of you may be familiar with, Brad Smart and I did a study that estimated the costs of making a hiring mistake as 15 times someone's annual salary. 15 times. And the clients we interviewed and gathered their data pointed to out-of-pocket costs as well as the opportunity cost of having a person in the role maxing your credit card out at the roulette table versus someone who is better matched. So it's expensive, it's expensive, it's expensive. And so why do we struggle as managers to pick people? I mean, what could be more natural than picking people? We struggle as managers to hire because we use voodoo hiring methods. And we made that up. And it's not a real method, it's just something we made up for the book. But the voodoo methods are, there are 2 or 3 different common ones. You may have seen these. The most common one among entrepreneurs, and frankly among CEOs of large companies too, is we call it the art critic approach to hiring. And the art critic, you know, sort of like the way an art critic would evaluate a painting or appraise a painting, you know, they'd come up with an assessment fairly quickly, and they make a decision based on intuition, gut feel, these sorts of things. So the art critic in hiring just basically, typically, figures out if there's a personal bond or not, asks some questions, and, you know, I know it when I see it, and I just hire people. As entrepreneurs, I beg you to add a little more process into your hiring approach than the art critic. The art critic's the most common approach. Another common approach. So the art critic's too loosey-goosey, unstructured, produces bad results. Another voodoo method we called the prosecutor approach to hiring. And this one, you know, we all have friends who are lawyers, you know, clipboard out, question 12B, note the furrowed brow. And these prosecutors, you know, take a very, very clinical, cold, rational approach to hiring, trying to stump the witness on the witness stand. And that approach creates such poor rapport with the interviewee, they're not going to tell you anything negative that will allow you to really understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. So the prosecutor approach, that doesn't work so well either. There are some other ones. The sponge approach just spends a lot of time with the person in an unstructured way. The terminator is kind of like Nate's approach was before he came through this training, where he just hire, terminate, didn't work out, terminate. So they figure, why put time in on the front end? You could just always fire the person later. Now, that's a challenging approach. The single worst approach to hiring I've ever heard of, just to cap it off with this one, my co-author on the book, Randy and I, we called it the animal test. And I swear to you all that at a training not too dissimilar from this one, an executive at a leading semiconductor company came up to me and said, "I've got the ultimate question. You can use it if you want. I'll tell it to you." Which I appreciate, his generosity, because I am using it in a different way than he ever imagined. And if you're out there, you know who you are. He asked the following question, with a smile on his face too. He said, you gotta lighten it up, the interview, and ask the question, if you could be any animal, what kind of animal would you be and why? And then he went on to show me this whole typology of the right answers, and it was too inappropriate to share in public. On break, if you want to know this guy's typology, and if you ever ask the question, I'll give you the playbook. But I asked him, how well does that work for you? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, does it allow you to hire the right person? And he said, no, I'm terrible at hiring, but it's entertaining to do and it breaks up the monotony. So that's why we're not good at hiring. It's not because we're not smart as managers, as entrepreneurs, as educators. Anyone in any field can benefit from this method. It's just simply that there are homegrown methods out there that don't really work. Few of us have been formally trained on an approach that does work. So Randy Street, my colleague, and I decided 3 years ago to set out once and for all and solve this problem for you all. And we did it. We did a ton of work, and I'm only telling you how we did it so that you can understand the extent to which we researched the solution. So when I show it to you, and it seems pretty darn straightforward and pretty simple, you know that it didn't just come off the top of our heads. The first thing we did is we looked at thousands of cases of successful and unsuccessful hiring that my firm, GH Smart, had collected over the previous 12 years. Second, because we didn't want to be accused of being biased, we got the University of Chicago, this like near Nobel Prize super brain guy named Steve Kaplan and his team of rocket scientists to do all the data analytics. So they did it, not us. We just provide the data. Third, Randy and I said, all right, picture us in St. Louis, speaking to a distinguished audience of hundreds of successful entrepreneurs and business people. You know, we need to give them some stories so they can see what this looks like in practice when it's done well. So we thought, hey, why don't we try to go out and interview the most successful entrepreneurs and managers we could find. We tried to get 10 billionaire entrepreneurs to share with us their best insights and their best stories on this topic of hiring. And we got over 20 of these folks interviewed for the book. They're very, very interested in the topic, and they're very generous with their time. So we've got great stories and anecdotes and advice from really successful people. We had over 20 billionaire entrepreneurs. We had over 20 Fortune 500 CEOs in our study. It is very, very exhaustive. Bottom line is we did a ton of homework for you so we could come up with a method that really works, and that is the best researched method out there. So we came out with it. There is a better way to hire than the voodoo methods. We named it the A method for hiring. And the A method for hiring, it's a process. It's a step-by-step process. It has 4 steps. And the whole remainder of our time together today, I'm going to walk you through each of the 4 steps. We're going to discuss the steps. I'll ask for more of your ideas, and we're going to do some exercises. It's going to be a little bit of a contact sport here. Possibly, someone from this audience will be hand-selected, nominated by your peers, to come up here and occupy one of these 2 chairs. And I'll actually show you in practice what it looks like to interview someone the right way. So we have all that in store for you here. Without further ado, let's jump into each of these 4 steps. And each of the 4 steps starts with the letter S. And there will be a quiz on this later. So please remember, my goal for you today is for you to focus on the who, not just chase the what in your business, as Craig said in the opening. and to remember this method. So here we go. The scorecard is the first step in the A method for hiring. This is really important. You can't skip any of these steps, but your entire hiring success or failure will come from beginning with the good scorecard. Here's how it works. And I created some takeaway value for you all because I'm in YPO too, and I know, we want to be able to do something different tomorrow, benefit from this stuff. So you all have this. As I hit the different tools, there's like a little cheat sheet and in a couple of cases an exercise. So there is a scorecard in here. I'd like you to look at it right now, please, because it will help you see what it looks like when it's completed. It's on page 4. Okay, what's a scorecard? A scorecard is a blueprint for what A performance means for a job. And this is not a job description. Okay, what's the difference? I hate job descriptions, by the way, and I'll try to be open and honest with you all about things that work, things that don't work. Job descriptions are too vague. I was working with a waste hauling company, a big one, and they're having some problem with sales in a certain region. So I visited the region, and I sat down with the sales manager, and I said, all right, how do you hire salespeople around here? Because your region is underperforming. And he said, well, we start with this job description. I said, show it to me. And what he showed me was a very vague list of duties and responsibilities. Sales representatives are required to meet with prospects via phone, qualify leads, and make visits. Blah, blah. There's no numbers in there. There's no performance standard. What I'm trying to show you is if any of you have job descriptions that you use for actually hiring that are vague like that, please, you don't have to totally throw them out, but let's transform them into a scorecard. Here's what a scorecard does. The scorecard has 3 parts to it. The first part is the mission for the role. And this is like at the top of this example. It's a little paragraph. It's very clear. What is it you need this person to actually accomplish in plain English in this role? The second part is the most important part of the scorecard. It's the outcomes. So this is where the scorecard really differs from a job description. Job descriptions are vague. Scorecards are specific. The outcomes I'm talking about are things like numbers. Grow revenue a certain amount. Go on so many customer visits within a certain time period, like a week. Achieve profit targets. Operating metrics. Percentages. Getting stuff done by a certain time. These are outcomes. So you'll probably have about 20 pieces of takeaway value today, I'm hoping, that you go and hire better tomorrow with. This is one of them, which is you got to write down the outcomes you're expecting, the outcomes that are numerical that you're expecting. What does it mean? If you're to be successful a year after this person started, what would they have gotten done that would make you smile and say, high five, good job, let's declare victory? So that's the hardest part of the scorecard. We'll do an exercise here in a moment individually. And where people commonly struggle is they haven't really thought about it that way, especially for like marketing roles or some customer service roles. There are different types of roles that are actually hard to pinpoint with numbers. I would encourage you to stretch yourself to try to think, all right, if I had to put a number down, which you do, what would be the number that really communicates success in that role? So that's essentially what a scorecard is it's the thing that you say, here's the mission, here are the outcomes I'm expecting, and if we accomplish that, I'm happy. The third part of the scorecard is called competencies, and that's just basically for a given role or for your company, what types of competencies are pretty important. So, for example, this pop quiz you all, for a sales role, selling balloons manufactured in St. Louis. Where's my balloon guy? There, balloons manufactured in St. Louis. Head of sales. What kinds of outcomes would you expect, and then what kind of competencies for this guy's balloon company? So let's do outcomes first. I want numbers, numbers, numbers. Then I want competencies. Competencies are things like persistence and that kind of thing. So don't mix the two. Two have their own place in the scorecard. Outcomes. For a head of sales for a St. Louis balloon manufacturing company, for the head of sales, what kind of outcomes are we talking? Grow revenue. Yeah, grow revenue. From what to what would you be excited if your head of sales grew your revenue, on an annual basis, either in percentage terms or actual dollar terms? What kind of growth are we talking?
Triple the business every year.
A wise guy. I picked you because you look nice. So now here's the challenge. If you say, hey, we're only going to hire people who can triple our business every year, what's the good or bad about that approach? It does limit your pool a bit. You might not ever fill that role. That's the downside. Upside is, aiming high is good. I like to counsel entrepreneurs and CEOs to don't highball or lowball, but basically pick numbers where, if they accomplish that, you are truly happy. We have an extra little hint there, which is try to set the bar high enough, to your point, sir, that only about 10% of your labor pool out there in the labor market could actually hit that bar, but not 1% or 0%. But if you're through your research, through interviews, you set the bar at a place where, for this role, head of sales, balloon company, only about 10% of the people we could hire for this role could grow the business, even 30% a year. Why don't we set the goal at like 30%? But then stick to it and make sure you're actually getting that person. How about competencies for head of sales, balloon company? What are some competencies that, first of all, who are we selling to? Is it consumer or businesses or what?
Businesses, distributors, the grocery stores and party supply stores.
Got it. So I want to go upper deck, left side. Just so you can hear what he said, they sell party balloons and stuff through distributors, like grocery stores and third parties, that kind of thing. So the head of sales would have to basically do business-to-business sales of balloons. What kind of competencies, the squishy, intangibles would you want in that head of sales for his company? Yes, sir. Social, energy. What else? All right, we're going to go front right. What kind of competencies are important, like pretty relevant for that role? So social, energy. What are let's get 5 more. Negotiating skills, right? You got big OEMs, grocery stores that think that they're the 800-pound gorilla. You have to negotiate well. What else? What's that? Handles rejection. Yeah, sales roles are tough, especially this one. You might, you want someone who just goes at it and keeps at it rather than shirking from rejection. Other competencies for this role. Yes, sir.
Sales experience?
Well, experience, interestingly, I appreciate that, isn't quite a competency. We'll talk about how experience plays into your evaluation of somebody when we talk about the interview piece. So how to actually figure out what they've actually done is key, but it's not a competency. What's another competency where if they have it, it's a good thing. If they don't have it, it's a bad thing for this role? Discipline. Yeah, discipline. Tell me about discipline in sales. Do they go together?
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Got to have a good discipline approach that keeps going and isn't sort of flavor of the day.
You bet. So, hiring heads of sales who have discipline in this case. Yep, last one.
Problem-solving skills.
All right, and what do you mean by problem-solving skills?
Critical thinking, consultative approach to sales.
Yeah, and I'll ask the balloon king of St. Louis. Is that one important? It could be, it couldn't be. Let's see. The critical thinking, problem-solving. Is it a consultative sale on a few possible buyers, in which case that is important, or is this person just knocking on doors and trying to get it out to hundreds and hundreds of stores?
There's a lot of promotions. There's a lot of rebate programs, so problem solving.
It is important. Okay, because it blends. It sounds like some promotions and some marketing stuff in there too. I really like the conversations that you have with your senior team when you write the scorecard. What we find with our clients is not everyone's on the same page on questions like that. And so can you imagine if you had 5 people interviewing a candidate and you all have a fuzzy scorecard in your head that's different? So the primary idea of scorecarding is let's be clear on the role, but let's really make sure we're all on the same page. Here's a controversial question I'll ask you all, because you're about to get lively, or you're like semi-lively, and I want you to be lively. And so let's get lively together, but here's a question. Should you hire specialists or generalists? Should you hire specialists, like people who do one thing really well, or generalists, people who can wear many hats? What do you think? And I'd love to get a little debate. Remember that old, tastes great, less filling. I want to know, let's do a show of hands first. I won't call on you, but I want to get a vote sense here. In hiring, this is a key question. It's a philosophical hot point. Do you hire the specialist or generalist? People who think, on average, you should go for the specialist, please raise your hand. Okay, about 8%. People who think you should hire generalists, please raise your hand. About, 95% or so. I am so thankful for the opportunity to remove the wool from your eyes today and to attempt to persuade you that you got to hire the specialist, actually. Here's a couple facts, and let me see if I can persuade you. You might say, well, Geoff, we're entrepreneurial companies. We got to wear lots of hats. I've just been around EO and YPO long enough to know that if you want to grow your business, the sooner you can get out of the mindset that your goal is to hire a generalist who can do 5 things pretty well, the better. The most successful EO, BOG, EMP, whatever they're calling it now, where I go every year, those folks who are growing their businesses really well, go for the specialist. The specialist is a person who can completely deliver on exactly what you're hiring them for, and they might not be able to do a bunch of other things. Nick Shabraya pointed this out when we were talking with successful business people. He was a CEO of General Dynamics during the decade in which his company was the best performing stock in his industry. And he's a very funny guy. He just basically said, I got this all wrong. I used to try to hire, the generalist, the person who could wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things. And here's what he said. What I found is people are really only good at a few things. And if the job and the role, the function is designed right, there are only a few things you really need someone to do. So why not match up the people who are narrowly really good at the things that you narrowly really need them to accomplish? So he had a bunch of problems when he took over his CEO-ship hiring generalists. And he described them as people who were, bright, hardworking, charismatic, semi-strategic, had the whole full gamut of skills. And what he found was, they were really good at a lot of things, but not great at any. I'm there. It's controversial. We can debate this for days, but please walk away at least with the perspective that, the sharper you can focus a scorecard on a set of activities and then hire someone who's just really good at that, the happier you'll be. An EO example, I had someone who came to this realization tell me, his name was Mike. He said, I used to, promote up the best salesperson and give them a bunch of things. And then our office manager, I gave her 10 different new pieces of the business to manage. And he kept trying to kind of make do and widen people's roles out. And he found, people just wouldn't really perform as well as if you'd bring in someone who is really good at sales, or bring in someone who's really good at administration. I hired a CFO who was really good at being a CFO. I didn't take one of my other colleagues or a consultant and say, hey, you're pretty smart. Why don't you be the CFO? I hired someone who's very specifically excellent at a narrow thing. So controversial insight. Try to hire the specialist if you can. And over time, as you're growing your businesses from $2 million in revenue, $5 million, $20 million, $80 million, $100 million, et cetera, you'll find early folks you start with, if they're going to continue to be relevant and performing, you're going to want to narrow their role over time. That's another trick I see people doing that works quite well, is think about narrowing people's roles as you grow so that they can center around their area of strength. I do buy the whole Marcus Buckingham strengths movement, which is basically says you're going to be most happy and productive doing what you're good at. I think there's that seems to have played out in our research as well. Scorecarding. All right, so it's pretty straightforward in concept. It's a little tricky in practice. We're going to do one individually right now so you can get the hang of it. So what I'd like you to do is think about a role either you might hire for if you're not hiring at the moment, or a role that you're definitely hiring for. And on this next page, page 5, this is like a 5-minute exercise. It's like kind of a quickie, but I need you to do this in order to lock in this lesson learned. So write the mission for the role, and if you're with your colleagues, team up, like do it together if 3 or 4 of you are here from one company. Choose the role, write the mission, write a few of the outcomes, the numbers that you need them to accomplish, and then a few competencies that you think are key. So we're gonna do this for 5 minutes. Raise your hands if you have questions. I'll come around and answer your questions. And then we'll come back and keep on trucking with step number 2.
Numbers. Okay, he's getting there.
It's good to get the categories and then fill in the number. That makes you happy.
I got numbers.
All right.
I do. I have numbers.
Nice.
Thank you.
This is good.
Yes.
They are numbers. Numbers, numbers, numbers. All right, if you haven't moved to the competencies part, jot a couple competencies down there that you think matter for that role. Oh, I got revenue per employee, productivity measures. No wonder you guys are in the front row. You guys are the gifted program right here. In a moment, I'll ask you for, if you feel like you got it and you nailed it, I'd love a couple examples just to help the rest of us learn what you came up with, especially if it has numbers. And then right after that, if any of you felt like, you know what, I get the concept, but I just don't think I can put any numbers down for this job, let me know too, and we'll help you out. All right. 1 more minute on competencies, and then we'll wrap it up and bring it in together to debrief. All right, let's do this. We're still on step 1 of the 4 steps in the A method for hiring. Who's got some good, tasty, delicious, specific numbers to share on their scorecard? You guys. So here, where's that mic? That pesky microphone. Are you a loud talker?
I am a very loud talker.
All right, turn around and just give us some sense of what the role is and some of your outcomes, please.
This is for manager of engineering services. And what we would be looking for this person to do is manage our engineering staff and grow our engineering staff. The outcomes are utilization of the staff of at least 80%.
At least 80% utilization.
X amount of revenue per FTE.
What's the X? Fill in the blank. Give us a real number. Be real with us. Be honest. What's the number? 20K?
20K.
20K!
200.
200K. Let's pick something. 20K per month in revenue per FTE. Got it. Excellent. Any other good ones like that? Awesome. More numbers, please, because without the numbers, there's no way you're going to hire just the right person. The numbers help you figure out what you need so you can actually spot it when you see it. We'll talk about spotting it in a second, but let's figure out first what the blueprint looks like. How about some other ones? This what seemed to be like a role that was pretty easy to do the outcomes with. Yes, here, ma'am, and then back up there. Yes.
I work for an insurance brokerage firm, and most of our employees are licensed commercial account managers that work behind the scenes for the broker.
All right, so this is an insurance brokerage, and this account manager role.
So for the account manager role, I put two specifics would be retain the producer's current existing clients' book of business by 85%.
All right, so retain 85% of the producer's current book of business.
And then grow new business for the producer by 15% each year.
Oh, I love that for two reasons. I loved yours too, because they're specific. You almost lost me on the whole X thing. I'm glad you guys filled it in. And yours, I really like for two different reasons. One is she clarified what existing customer performance was expected, like, hey, keep 85% of the current customers, and she specified what the growth target was. And what was the growth again?
15%.
15%. That was close. You almost, it seemed like you weren't prepared to share with us the 15%, but you did.
Yes,
I'm happy. That's great. I'm awesome. I'm excited about that. 15% growth and new stuff. How about just one more of these like kind of easy ones, and then I'd love it if any of you felt like, you know what, I couldn't come up with numbers for this role, and then we can open it up to the wisdom of the whole auditorium to help you out. Yeah, so how about another one with some numbers, preferably? Yes, sir.
This was construction. The role was project manager. So their job is to manage all constituents to build a project on time and budget.
And so this is like construction management, project manager. All right, so I heard an on time, on budget.
In a safe and high quality manner.
All right, now let's get. Oh, good. That was just the mission, right?
That was the mission. The outcomes are improved baseline profitability on the job by 20%.
Ooh, baseline. So help us with that one. So improve baseline profitability on the job by 20%. Does this person have the ability to do that?
Yes, they would control the whole process. So what would happen is we would establish a baseline going in, and then they basically manage the process.
Great. That's a key role. Just another angle on this is you want to make sure that the person actually has the control and authority to make those numbers happen, which it sounds like they do in this case. Great. What was another outcome, please?
Shorten schedule by 15%. So again, baseline is established with the building schedule, so it's their responsibility to work with the various constituents to try and impact and improve upon that schedule.
Great. Appreciate it. You guys have it. You got one more? Please. Extra credit?
Achieve zero lost hours and zero safety incidents on the job site.
Great. Lost hours, safety, goose egg, goose egg. Thank you. So these are very, very clear. Who's got a toughie that all of us could help out with where it always seems like someone's got, yeah, what do you have there? A role that doesn't seem to lend itself to quantification. Yes. All right. There you go. I like that. So hold on. Customer support, I know what that is. What's the 500,000 revenue part?
Well, that's how many, what I would say a good revenue would maintain.
Yes.
In terms of how many clients, that equates to the number of clients, equates to the number of clients and or revenue.
That works. So it's basically like that's a quantity metric, right? That's how many clients that one customer service rep should be able to handle.
Right. And then I said this person has to maintain at least 96% customer retention.
Yeah, 96% customer retention. Here's an interesting entrepreneurial sized company insight. I get this pushback a lot. Oh, we don't have those numbers. Well, get them. like some of this stuff's important. I had someone who's like, my entire business lives or dies based on customer retention. I'm like, oh, okay, good. So so how are you doing? No. You know, it's like, well, no. Like, get the numbers. Like, and if you need a controller to measure the numbers or get the folks to, you personally don't need you don't have to measure the numbers, but get someone in your business to measure numbers so that you can take some of these squishier roles and actually measure success. Customer satisfaction, number of percent of repeat customers, all this stuff, it shouldn't be theoretical. It should be like real numbers that you can manage to. All right, that worked? All right, so you had like a tough one that you overcame the mountain of challenge and you came up. Anyone have one where they're stumped where it's just like, it's hard to imagine how you can put numbers on a current thing, and then we'll help you out? Trying to think, someone's volunteering. Yes, sir, please. And everybody, I need your help because my last name is Smart, but I'm usually not smart enough to do these on my own. So, and I want to get you a mic here, sir.
A creative arts director for a construction company. So here's an individual who really doesn't have a managerial role, but does have a role to be collaborative in a team environment, but might produce those graphics, the banners, trade shows, advertising, involved in all things that are graphic in nature, but not necessarily copy in nature, again, for a construction company.
Yep, it's always the creative roles that, okay, got it. So I think there's hope. What do you all think? How do we help, and what's your name, sir? Jim. How do we help Jim write a scorecard that has some actual measurable outcomes for this creative marketing, branding type role? Where are we? Yes, ma'am.
I've actually got a strategic branding and design company, and some of the measurements that I wrote down were adhering to project timelines.
Project timelines, right? That matters. They can be genius, creative types, but if they're not getting their darn working on time, they're not making you any money. Love it. What's another one?
Turning revisions around in 3 days.
Ooh, like a responsiveness metric, right? 3 days from revision to revision turnaround. Here's another one that I like that I've heard. I borrowed this from the...
what was that again?
Yeah, the second one, sorry.
The second one was turning around revisions in 3 days.
So like if there are revisions on versions, that they, rather than just sit on the revisions, they're fast. It's like a responsiveness metric. Here's another one. I appreciate those two. There's this kind of like in the eye of the beholder type metric that you can get for the really creative roles, where it's like, okay, listen to I think the questions are as valuable as the actual outcome task, which is, if this person did a great job or a lousy job, who would know and who would care? And if the answer is, well, actually, the customer, it's, if they're happy with it, that's all that matters. Great. Survey the customer. And you want people who have 90% or better customer satisfaction in their work, or set the metric however you want. Or if it's more like they're serving an internal, account manager team or something, and it's really that's kind of the internal customer, great, survey them. And just, after every project, lots of companies do this kind of thing, just measure the project team basically, rates the work of folks who are maybe not client-facing, and you can keep track that way. All right, so it's possible. You got it. You got the hang of it. It's basically, so the key again on scorecard before we move to the next step, which is source, is being specific pays off a lot. If I'm pretty good at this interviewing thing, but if you didn't tell me the scorecard for what real outcomes you're expecting from someone, I literally have no idea how you can interview someone effectively and pick the right person. It'd feel very blind and very vague to me. So make this process easier. Spend 20 minutes working on the scorecard for any role, and then once you've written it, if it's a role you keep hiring for, you could just you could use the same scorecard. Are there questions on scorecard? I'll do questions if you have any at the end of each of these 4 steps, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. And I am off stage at 4 on the dot. Otherwise, Craig gets out the hook, and I don't. And yeah, okay. So anyway, questions on scorecard, please, before we move on to the next step. And I do want questions. I think some speakers, I find this annoying when I'm in your seat, and they're like, "No questions, good," and they kind of move on. The best part of this is literally the questions, because then if you're wondering it, your neighbor's probably wondering it too. Yes, please.
Samples for some good ideas for various roles that repeat, like sales and operations.
Yeah. Like, is there like a library of samples somewhere?
Do you have resources that you point to? Or?
Gosh, we don't. We should. Once we upgrade our book website, we're thinking about doing some blog stuff where people can share scorecards. That's one of the things that we should have, but we just don't yet. I appreciate that, though. I'll give you the next best, which is here's my sort of like expert take on the key outcomes by function. Ready? Let me see if I can do this within 3 minutes or less. Sales, it's all about, you got to figure out new revenue and old revenue. So existing customers, how much sales? Is it an existing customer kind of role? Bless you, Craig. Or is it like all about knocking on new doors? That's it for sales. If it's a rep. If it's sales management, it's that plus some sort of metric around hiring on the sales team, like increase the number of our sales reps. Or if you want to really go nuts on the who top grading stuff, you say something like increase the mix of talent from 40% A players to 75% A players within 12 months. So there's always like some hiring, kind of upgrading of the team component for managers. Okay, next one, CFOs. Yes? Yes. Yep. Oh, that's such a hard problem to solve. It is. And that's why it's like a gut-wrenching one, which is, here's actually a tough, I find this tough in my role, because I'll teach you guys this method. It works. Then there's always this question of like, ooh, there's Fred in shipping. And he's such a nice guy. He's so nice. But he's kind of the wrong guy. Here's what I'd say. When you go back to your companies, try to get people paired up with jobs that they're good at. You'll get, if you start introducing scorecards, here's what you could do. A lot of companies your size do this. They just have everyone in the company write their own scorecard, and then for each functional area, you kind of take the best ideas, and then you as the CEO, for those of you, the members in the audience, you approve it. So that's a pretty good first step in executing this. What you do find, and this is normal, is that some people are in the wrong job. If you're lucky, Fred in shipping, who talks too much, and you just want him loading boxes, like Fred, scorecard says like 10 boxes a minute, all right? You're doing like 10 boxes an hour, and you're jabbering with everybody you see. Now, you might originally think, uh-oh, this is bad news. It could be good news. Fred might actually be outstanding as a customer service person who likes talking to people. So there's this sort of sorting out process that typically happens where you realize, let's get clear on what the roles are. Let's take a look. Are all the folks like perfect in their roles? No, probably not. Would people perform better, be happier, make a greater contribution if they played a slightly different role that played to their strength more? Yes. But until you really spec it out into a scorecard, it's hard to make those kind of deliberate decisions. Thank you for that. Yes, sir?
What are the parameters for success? So you have the problem is 50% of the people are hiring mistakes now. So what makes those mistakes successes in the future? Is it a time frame? Is it they meet the goals on the scorecard?
Yeah, okay, so you're asking about like parameters of success. It's kind of like the easiest one is just a year later, did you regret hiring that person or not? And if you're not regretting it, then let's call it a success. And if you are, let's call it a mistake. The reason I think most people make hiring mistakes is they frankly see too few candidates. They're too unclear about what they're looking for, and they hire someone who's good in an area that's not really all that relevant. Like I think a lot of salespeople get jobs because they're good, jovial people, and they might not ultimately be right for the role. So it's about like focusing and then just my whole goal in my professional life is to have the right who in the right where, doing the right what for you to build a valuable company. And that's the ultimate parameter of success. So if you pull back and look down at your organization, if you feel like 90% or better of the folks are performing at or above your expectation level, you're doing great. That's great. Like that's the goal. You know, it's not going to be perfect, but 90% feels good. 20% feels lousy because it feels like, you know, again, back to the Nate story, you can't really go on vacation. You're constantly worried for the next mistake to happen. You know what? I don't want to shortchange that 2 questions ago on like different functional areas. Let me just give you like the cliff notes on sales people. It's existing and new revenue. Like that's it. That's it. Finance people, it's some metric of accuracy, timeliness, and whether or not they're good to work with. Like those, some mix of those make up a lot of the controller, CFO type scorecards that I see. Ha! Yeah, is 2 out of 3 okay? That's a trick. You're asking good questions now. What you can do, here's what happens. If you're doing this right, here's the kind of conversation you'll have once you've seen some candidates and you've rated them on the scorecard. So the scorecard isn't just for, you know, thinking about it. That's the thing you actually pass around. And if the 5 of us are interviewing him, you know, we're all literally like, well, we'll talk about interviews in a second, but we're filling out the scorecard. Now here's where, if you're doing this right, and this just happened with a client last week, I felt great because I knew he's on the right track. He said, interesting. So we've got 3 or 4 candidates in play for this role. You know, this one's really good at outcome number 3. This one's good at outcome number 4. This one's good at the first 2 outcomes, but really lousy on the 4th. What it allows you to do is make an educated, deliberate choice. Like, here's the question I ask my client. So if you're my client, I say, what's the most important outcome? Let's say it's a sales role. You know, and you're like, oh, this guy's, you know, good at getting new clients, but this woman's really good at growing existing ones. I would just simply say, which is more important, getting new ones or growing existing ones? And if you're like, well, look at the scorecard, Geoff. It says like 90% of the role is growing existing ones, right? That's the strategy. We have 4 out of 5 major regional hospitals already signed up, so we don't need to go get another one. There's only one left. The whole point of this job is to grow our existing sales. Boom, hire the woman. Versus the guy who is more of the like, go out and get new ones. And you know you're doing scorecarding right if you're making that kind of deliberate choice on a candidate. Because no one's perfect, really. I mean, no one's perfect. My earlier theory, we're all good at just a couple key things. And the question is, you know, can you hire the person who's really good at the 1 or 2 key things on the scorecard that you really need, while not being horrible at the other ones? All right. We're going to move on to the next one. So what did I do? I did sales, CFO, operations people. It's all about productivity, efficiency, cost. Those are some key ones you put numbers next to. What's another functional area? Marketing is, frankly, it's usually sales. It's tagged to sales success. Customer rated success metrics. What else is key? For your role should be all about these things. I'm talking to the members now in the audience. Your role should be about revenue. It should be about profitability. It should be about talent. Like, so whatever if you're at 40% A players today, you want to get to 90+%. Give yourself a goal. It's about operations, strategy, quality, employee morale, or some sort of like employee satisfaction metric. Like those are like, and then if you plan to sell your company, your ability to actually get an acquisition done. So 7 or 8 key things for the members. Make sure those are on your scorecards. I write a scorecard. I do it every year. I do it in the middle of December. I write my scorecard for the next year. I circulate it to my colleagues and say, hey, what do you think? Here's where I'm going to focus my energy. And it's a really helpful exercise for you to dig deep and figure out what's my highest and best use at my company, and what should I spend the majority of my time doing this next year, and what outcomes matter the most. So you can do it for yourself, do it for your team, in addition to doing it for the hires. All right, let's keep moving just so that we make sure we get all the 4 steps. Second step is an easy one. So the first one, scorecard, very important. The second step in the A method for hiring is called source. And this is the single greatest, most frequent question I get asked by audiences of entrepreneurs. It's, okay, I get the whole hire great people thing, but like, where do you find them? Where are they? Like, give me the secret formula or the playbook. Like, how do I find these A players, these high performers. And a quick sidebar on definitions. What's an A player? We've changed it a couple of times since a decade ago when we came out with all the top grading stuff. We've changed the definition. An A player, and that's frankly part of the reason we call the A method the A method. It's like your goal is to try to hire someone who performs at the A level. What does that mean? An A player is someone who can accomplish with 90% confidence on your part a scorecard that only the best 10% of the people could accomplish. I'll repeat. An A player is a candidate. A player candidate is someone that, because of the preponderance of evidence, you have a 90% degree of confidence that that person can accomplish that scorecard, and the scorecard is sort of hard enough or challenging enough that only the best 10% of the folks you could possibly hire for that job could accomplish that scorecard. If you set the bar too low, you're going to get killed by your competitors. If you set the bar too high, you're not going to hire anybody. But if you set the bar, I like the bar. Randy and I debated this. We settled in on, you know what, if you're consistently hiring people that 9 out of 10 of them work out, and the people who work out are performing at a level that only 10% of the folks out there in your labor market could perform at, you're going to be a very happy entrepreneur. Like that's the goal for you. All right, so where do you find these A players? Where are they? Well, I'll ask the audience in a second. Let me just punchline it with, we asked there were actually 78 of these captains of industry, these entrepreneurs and these CEOs that we talked to, and we asked them a question. Where do you find your best people? And the number one way that successful people like you find their best people is, in a word, through referrals. And there are outside referrals, like out in the marketplace, like, hey, Elizabeth, you're one of my customers, and I'm selling medical products, and, have you seen any other really great medical products companies or sales managers? I'm trying to hire a sales manager. You know me, you know us, you know the market. What do you think? So I think of who of the Elizabeths I know, and I ask her for referrals. That's an outside referral. An inside referral is like an employee bounty kind of thing. This has to be the most underappreciated mechanism for sourcing great candidates and underfunded in the U.S. It's the employee referral bounty. Does anybody here offer an employee referral bounty? Good. Like 20% of you. All right, so the 80% of you who don't, let me try to pitch you on why this works. Employee referral bounties. It's expensive to do advertising and recruiters, and like the whole rigmarole of the normal way people hire people is like really expensive. Think about that cost in cost per hire relative to offering a referral bounty to employees. The employee probably knows the people you want to hire anyway, so it's quicker. The employee isn't going to bring bozos in because they look bad. The employee has a vested interest in that person getting up to speed and hanging out and doing a good job in the company. I think it's a fantastic thing. And so how much do you all offer in your referral bounty, the 20% of you? So the other 80%, might have some ballpark idea. Like what's it worth to an employee if they source in someone who gets hired? $3,000. $3,000. $10,000. $2,000. $2,000, $10,000. Do I hear 15? Yes, sir.
It works pretty well for us. Between $500 and $5,000, there's a difference.
So here, say that again louder. That's interesting. Just say it a little louder so that they can hear it.
Probably a third to a half of our new management training candidates are referred from internal existing A players.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of money we put into the bounty doesn't seem to have a big effect on what our outcome is.
All right.
I've always wondered about that. So we can crank up the number and it doesn't really move.
I think it's a great insight. Maybe let's come to collective wisdom here. So this theory might be one of have a referral bounty, but frankly, it doesn't have to be that high to get all the value, is kind of what your point is, because they've tried it at 500 or 5,000, and the quality and quantity is roughly the same. Okay, you agree too. You're Mr. 10,000.
Well, we'd make it 5 and then double it for periods of time when we needed more. And we didn't see any difference. So.
Interesting. Okay, this is good. We're all learning here. This is good stuff. Who else? Anyone else have a perspective on bounties, who offer them or don't offer them? Like what, roughly? Like 3,000, 1,000, or? 500, 1,000, 2,000. All right, so you get the idea. I talked to Paul Tudor Jones for our book. This guy's an entrepreneur, billionaire, cool guy. Asked him, hey, so where do you find your best people? And we actually talked through at some labor, who his best people were, where they came from. And he said, we did this study over the last 10 years, and we found that internally referred people were 4 times better than non-internally referred people. I said, well, what do you mean, like quantify that? And he said, we calculated that our cost to hire was half as much, and the probability that they would work out and actually be here, more than 2 years was twice as high for internally referred people. So he's like, it's like 4 times better. It's paid out over 9 years. And it's paid out if both y'all are here still, which helps me in the following way. Yeah, it's, so it's a big number, and I actually did find, unlike you too, and I respect your experiences, mine was when I jacked it to that level, I woke up a bunch of folks who had never even heard me the first 100 times I said, anybody know anybody we could hire? So it did work. By having it be, if both of you are still here, that's how the referring person gets paid out. It is really cool. I get all sorts of extra warm and fuzzy employee morale behaviors from the referring person to the referred person, because, David's got like 90 grand resting on whether you stick around another 8 years. So he's like, hey, can I, Russ, can I get you anything? Like, is your career development going as well as you'd hoped? And, need any leads or anything? So it's cool. I like it. We just started doing it 2 years ago because that's when we did the research for the book. And it's working great. So I'm keeping it. I'm sold on it. I love the idea of having a referral program. If you stage it, payouts over time so that both people have to be there still, creates doubly good incentives and frankly reduces your risk, because you don't mind paying out a fraction of what someone's earning for you. That's all right, but you don't want to pay out and then get nothing for it.
So the payout's in 9 years?
No, it's every year for 9 years. So it's at start date. Hey, here you go, boom, 10 grand. Holiday presents are covered this year, courtesy of our firm. Thank you for sourcing him, who we make $150,000 on in profit per year. So it's like, paying you 10 grand for having an extra person in a role that would have been unoccupied is a great deal for our firm. So, and it gets paid out just every year at the person's anniversary.
How many people have you done it with? So you have 50 people on your...
A handful, I don't know, 4 or so?
We need numbers. We need
numbers.
4. 4. We've done it with 4 people.
4 out of how many?
27.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's great. So I like it a lot. We have a head of recruiting in our firm. He's a consultant. He wears the head of recruiting too. And he's mentioned, we actually saved last year in the recession year, we were able to significantly pare back on our outside recruiting expense simply because, we had this offer going and it was great. So our head of recruiting basically told me, I'm covered. I get he had the quantity and the quality of inbound candidates, like more than he knew what to do with. So we could actually end up saving over $100,000 last year on external recruiting fees. Yes, sir.
Now, would there be any merit to doing that in something other than a sort of straight line, 10 grand, 10 grand, 10 grand? I mean, more like sort of like a tractor pull, where the further you get down the track, the harder.
Like it ramps up a little bit. Well, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you because it seems to me that there's more incentive, right, on the back end. You want these people to stay longer and longer.
Sure,
right?
and presumably they're even more productive later. Yeah, you bet.
I don't know.
I hear you. I appreciate the thought. So as you're going from not offering any of this at all to offering it, consider some of the best practices you're hearing here around how to actually structure it. But I'm here just to tell you that people I respect do it, works. I've used it, seems to work great. We're on break right now, right? 5 minutes? Okay. You sure? Are we going deeper? All right. 4? Okay. Where the heck are we? We're talking about bounties. So that's pretty easy, right? Offer a bounty. Here's the great, and here's the, okay, so internal ones are easy. Outside, remember I said referrals. Inside referrals, outside referrals. Inside referrals are easy, somewhere between $500 and $100,000. Tell people if you source someone, we hire, and they stay, you get paid. That's inside referrals. Outside referrals take a little more work, but they're a great place to go too. And these are still referrals, so the same principle applies of people who know you referring people in, whether they're inside the company or outside the company. It's a good thing. I have a challenge for you all. I had this guy. It was at a Fortune conference, big group like this, and some guy on the way back said, "I tried everything to try to source talent," and this is more around boom times, the last cycle. Everyone's growing fast. Can't hire enough. Can't find enough talent. I just, I'm giving up on your method because I can never use it because I don't have enough people to use it on. And so I gave him the following challenge. It worked for him. It's worked for anyone who feels stuck like they don't have enough good candidates. And the challenge for you for maximum takeaway value is on page 6. And here's the challenge. That's the sourcing challenge. So we already did, see towards the bottom, that recruiting bounty thing. So one thing you might, while you're sitting there, think about is, do I buy that? 20% of the group does it. Geoff seems high on the idea. Am I committed to offering employees a referral bounty? If so, how much are you going to offer? And by when do you think you might do that? So that we've already covered that. At the top of the page, this sourcing challenge, seeking referral saying. Here's how this works. This is a lot. I got this idea from the billionaires. I got this one idea from Pat Ryan. Anybody know who Pat Ryan is? Anybody go to Northwestern? Right here, Welsh Ryan Arena, Ryan Field, Ryan. He's donated half the campus. Okay, so this guy grew up Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Started a insurance brokerage business with 2 other people. Today, the 3rd tallest building in Chicago has his company's name on the side of it. He's a billionaire, and his company is worth $20 billion called Aon. I was in his office, and this is actually way before we wrote this last book. I was in his office about 10 years ago when he won CEO of the Year for Chicago. Crane's Chicago Business, CEO of the Year. And he was just making me wait because I forgot what I was talking to him about. And I'm just sitting there, and the writer was interviewing him for this article. And the writer asked the question, how did you do it, Pat? How did you build from scratch a $20 billion empire? And I just about fell out of my chair because what he said was extremely relevant to you all today in this topic. He said, well, I'm not really smarter than the next person. A lot of smart people in business. And he kind of talked like that. But I do something different than what all of them do. And what he said was, I recruit my own people harder than anyone else in business I've ever met. And then now I chime in because I heard that and I'm kind of like, well, what do you mean by that? What? You recruit harder. He said he personally sets a goal of hiring 30 people into his business every year. This is a huge company. And he's personally out there talking to customers, talking to suppliers, talking to people he knows. Hey, do you know anyone we should hire? Hey, I'm trying to hire a head of strategy. Hey, I'm trying to hire a salesperson for Southeast. Hey, I'm trying to hire this person. He personally, that was his one answer. His one answer to the question, how do you build a multi-billion-dollar empire was, I spend more time sourcing talent into my company than other business people seem to. And he spends about a third of his time on it. A third of his time, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time, and it's a third of his time. But he said there's nothing more valuable than that, so that's why he spends all the time on there. He gave me the idea for this exercise, and the exercise is, because I talked to him about it, I said, well, how does that actually work? And he said, how it actually works is you sit down and you write out 10 people you think would be good referral sources. What's a good referral source? A good referral source is somebody who knows you and who's pretty well plugged in, kind of Malcolm Gladwell tipping point. I think he calls them influencers, right? Who just, they're well networked and they know people. So if you trust your referral source and they know you and you think that they know a bunch of people, you pick up this device. It's, what do they call it? Oh, a telephone. And you push the numbers. This is cool how this works. That guy talks on the other end of this thing, and you ask the following question. Russ, I'm hiring a CFO. And I really respect you and the people you know, and I want you to think for about a minute about who you think I should hire. I don't want someone unemployed, and I don't want someone who's desperate. I want the very best CFO you know who should come join my company. Are you willing to help me out? He says, no. No, I'm just kidding. He says, sure, yeah, I'll help you out. Can't really think of anyone. That happens sometimes too. But don't let him off the hook. Like my friend Eric in Chicago, I'm hiring consultants. He's a well-networked, schmoozy guy. I tried this on him. Eric, I'm trying to hire people. I don't think you've ever referred someone to me. I know you know people I should hire. Who should I hire to be a consultant in my company? He said he didn't know. I said, think harder. And he actually then thought for a second, clickety-click on his Outlook, and he's like, you know what? And I love it when this happens. You know you're doing it right when this happens. Your referral source says, you would never get her, but the person you want to hire is Katie Williams at such and such company. You know, like that now you know, that's like fantastic. There's nothing that riles me up more than hearing someone is so good, I would never be able to hire them in a million years. My partner in New York, Elena, was like that. Her name's Elena, not Katie. I made that up, but her name's Elena. And this person basically said, yeah, I know exactly who you should hire for New York. It's Elena Botello. She's at McKinsey though. Like she's doing great, and she's getting paid a boatload, and they love her, and she seems to love it there. It's a hopeless cause, Geoff. You'll never get her, ever. Don't even think about getting her. Like this is like what I'm getting from my friend. I'm just kind of like, yes, I want to hire her. Give me her number. You know, so you call them up. Here's what you do. I'm just giving you my best tactics today, you guys. You're getting all my good stuff today. This isn't even in the book. When you call the person up, it's very important. So I find Elena is the best thing since sliced bread in the market. And I call her up. Hey, I was talking to Eric Cohen the other day, or you email them. Eric Cohen speaks very highly of you. And in fact, I even tell them this. I say things like, I asked Eric in the entire planet Earth, who's the best person I should hire? And he mentioned one person, and that was you. Pause. Let it soak in. Let the adrenaline of a nice, genuinely delivered compliment course through her veins. And then here's what you ask. What you ask is, would you be willing to have a phone call and just tell me what your career plans are? That works. 9 times out of 10, she will say, yeah, I got to tell you, I am very happy where I'm working, but sure. She's pleased that her mutual friend here has paid her a big compliment. You don't seem like you're saying, like, can I send you my company brochure? And I mean, you're not like, you know. Can you repeat the question? Yeah, the question is, would you mind, or would you like to set up a call to talk about your career plans? I love that question. It's irresistible. So far what you've done, you compliment them, then you ask them the career plans question. It's a two-parter. You compliment them. I asked Eric who the best people in the entire planet are who would be happy and successful, that's my whole way of saying it, working here. And he mentioned only one person, and that was you. So I was wondering if you'd be interested to talk to me about what your career plans are. Yeah, I don't know if you're a good match or not. Eric, won't stop talking about you, but I'm interested. You want to sound interested but not desperate, complimentary but not presumptive. It's sort of, you play it kind of casual, but I can't remember the last person. I've done this probably 100 times, and I've had 90 people say sure. I'm trying to remember, like, what was the last person who said, like, no, I'm going to stand here having been complimented genuinely and have a perfectly normal seeming human express genuine interest in me. I'm just going to say I'm just too busy for that. I actually can't remember the last time someone said no. So that's what you do. If you want to do the Pat Ryan routine, you go sit down and write out, and we're taking a break. Mere seconds from now. 26 seconds from now, we're going to be on break. So this is it. Soak up the last little bit on source, then we're moving on to select. Write down 10 referral sources, people you trust who know the person you should hire. Number 2, call that person up, deliver a genuine compliment, ask them if they have time to tell you about their career plans. You, my friends, will have, and you combine that with your new internal employee referral program, you will have a source of very high quality, very interesting candidates, and then the challenge will simply be picking the right one. We are on break for 15 minutes. I can't wait to see you again back here in 15 to do the 3rd step. Thank you. Are you getting sound? Okay, good. Awesome. All right, as we get back in here, can I start?
To get started, they'll come when they come.
All right, no problem. We'll do a little debate. Has anyone told you look like Ronald Reagan? God, you look like Ronald Reagan. Like a young, sharp, alive one. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, where's my guy who asked about growing people versus hiring people? Where are you? We're going to have a debate. There you are. All right, just for fun, as people are streaming in, let's debate the following age-old question in leadership, which is, when do you fire somebody and hire a new one versus grow the one you have? So, sir, since you at the machining tool company teed up this interesting little mini debate, this is like a, you know, in a nice restaurant you get the like extra food you didn't even order. This is like the amuse-bouche of your intermission. We're doing a quick debate on an age-old question. And this guy is basically saying, hey, look, are we going to talk about growing people? Because growing folks, he's had great success with growing people in his business rather than just hiring a new ones. So I'd love to debate this for only a couple minutes. We're dangerously short on time, and I owe it to you to get through our 4-step method here. Who thinks you should, how do you know, here's the question, how do you know when to fire someone versus keep investing in their growth? Because hiring and firing kind of go together a little bit. I try to keep this all positive and hiring oriented, but they're related. How do you know when to fire? So how do you know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, and when to run?
I'm not necessarily talking about firing somebody. I'm talking about taking somebody that has good attributes.
Yes.
And adding my knowledge to them so that they can grow the company. Now, my decision is not fire them or to grow them. My
Sure.
decision is, do I look for a personality that fits my mold,
Yep.
or a talent that fits my mold, and then grow them into the way I want my company to run.
Yeah, let's call that mentoring or coaching, developing a person. You know, so how do you guys decide who to coach? Let's raise hands on C's, B's, or A's. Who thinks you should coach C players? Because hey, you got to give them a chance. C players, coaching the C's, coaching the C's, coaching the C's. 1%. Who thinks you should coach your B's? Yeah, coach your B's. Makes some sense, right? You got some folks, maybe they've got the potential to be an A, maybe that. Who says coach your A's? Ooh, we got a battle between the A's and the B's. Okay, let's play this. Who's got a strong perspective on? We're not worried about C's, so it's about A's and B's. Who has a strong perspective that says coach your A's, not your B's? Oh my gosh. This is very exciting. You do. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Because I'm with you. Okay? Represent. Represent our perspective. You're two of us in a big auditorium. We could get attacked and pummeled if people don't like what we have to say here, but we're going to try to persuade. You have a strong perspective, sir, that you should coach your A's, not really as much your B's. Why is that?
Because your A's usually produce most of the output. So if you can get a 30% coaching lift on your A versus a 30% coaching lift on your B, you're going to get a lot more lift for the same amount of coaching.
Brilliant! And for the folks up there, what he said was, hey, let's assume, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, tell me. Slam dunk. That was good. Knuckles all the way around. He said, hey, if you're going to get a 30% lift on coaching someone, it's like an investment of your time. If you get a 30% lift on a B player's performance level, that will be smaller than a 30% lift on an A player's performance level. I'm not saying I know all the answers to all the age-old questions, but I will be clear on my perspective, it's exactly yours. Working with hundreds of companies, I see the managers like you getting the most in return satisfaction, performance by coaching the A's, and here's what you do on the B's. I'm just going to jump to a punchline. We won't have a debate because it opened with the right answer, so we'll just go ahead and move on with the rest of the content. Here's what you do with B's. Here's what you do with B's. Here's what you do with B's. My advice, might be right, might be wrong. My advice from working with lots of these companies is try to find a role change to answer the question, how does a B become an A? I will happily go mano a mano with anyone who wants to argue and debate about the merits of taking a person who's underperforming, in their job and doing stuff to them, same job, no change, same person, and kind of expecting a different outcome. We just don't see it. We estimate, a guy on my team, he's a big expert in the field of personal development. I'm kind of the hiring guy. He's like the develop guy. Even he likes the idea of, everyone can benefit from coaching. I think that's right. But he leads with, make sure the role fits, make sure the role fits, make sure the role fits. So your first move, to resolve this age-old problem, is coaching time. Your folks who are already A's or folks you think can be A's in the B population, coach them. And the folks who are like chronically B players, like they're just, they're not horrible. They're not taking your credit card and charging Russian roulette to it. But let's face it, you have someone who's like sort of doing an okay job, pretty good job, okay job, not a great job. It's like 1 in 50 of those folks who actually make meaningful progress in exactly the same job. It's about 1 in 50 without changing the job. It's about 30 out of 50 cases where if you change the role, the person can actually bubble up and perform at a high level. I had someone in my own company who was just doing a good job in one role, and we said, you seem really good at this other stuff, would you please change jobs? And they said, is this a demotion or a promotion or what? And I said, all it is like, I think you do that job better. And they took that job and they did a lot better, and they were happier and they stayed a long time, and it's great. I love the role change solution for Bs. We digress. But I appreciate over break the chance to tee up this issue because it's an important one. So again, to summarize that, who do you coach? You coach people who are likely to be successful. And those are like your B plus to A folks. And if people are in the B range or the high C range, I almost hesitate to say this because it's a real rare case, but even someone in a high C range, if you find out what they're really good at and you have something that you can make them director of that, you might actually turn them. But if you just leave their role the same, I don't care how much coaching you do, it's probably not going to move the needle. Oh my gosh. We have to do the hardest step. This one's hard. This one requires, I can't do it alone. It requires someone from the audience. Not yet, but in a second. I found the easiest way to help you learn how to do the select step is to show it to you. And so I'll show it to you in a second here. Okay, but first, let's tell you what it is. So far, just to summarize. Hiring. Number one problem in business. Huge driver of your success. Let's get it right. 4-step process. Scorecard first. Figure out the blueprint for the person you're going to hire. Second is source. Get plenty of candidates in. So now where I've left you, if I just stopped and walked off the stage now, I'd leave you like drowning in candidates. You'd have tons of candidates. What I'm going to now teach you is how to pick the right one. So source leads into select. So remember when I told you when you find that Elena Botello person you source who's great and you want to get on the phone with her and do that whole talk about your career goals and all that, there's actually an interview for that. So there are 4 interviews within the select step. And you use them at different stages of the process. So here's how it works. And I am now on page 7 of your handout. We'll give you just the cheat sheet for this first interview. I hesitate in a format like this where we're moving quickly to like spend a lot of time going through each of the 4 interviews. I don't think we could do that justice, but what I will do is I'll tell you what they are. I've given you the interview questions, and then we're going to spend a little extra special time on the second one, because that's the toughest. But the first one's pretty easy. It's called the screening interview. And this really answers the question, when I have my first interview with someone, what do I talk about? And I would encourage you all, I'm trying to be very prescriptive, like do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Don't set as a goal in your first interview with someone to figure out if you like them or not, or to try to get them to like you. That's what a lot of people do, and I think it's a waste of time, because what you end up doing is it's not a good enough filter. You end up bringing too many people in to meet your whole team who are like the wrong candidate, and now they're just not only wasted your time, they just wasted your 5 or 6 colleagues' time. So I would humbly offer to you that the goal of the screening interview is to weed out any candidate that you're not absolutely thrilled with once you get some data points. So you want to save time in interviewing? Do not bring in people to your company who you're sort of lukewarm with after doing a screening interview. Screening interviews you can do on the phone. They usually take about a half hour, 45 minutes or so. And here's the way it works. You basically ask them 4 questions. You say, what are your career goals? This is like one of the best questions ever, because what you're hearing is them tell you the story really of like who they are and what they're trying to do. And when you hear that, you go, oh, you can't get that at our company. You know, you just know there's like not a good match there. But if what you're hearing is they're both, have the background and the motivation, the skill and will, as we say in the book, to do pretty much what you have waiting for them at your company, then that's a good thing. So career goals, you just want to hear that what they want to do in their career, is something that matches up with what you can offer them. Second is, what are you really good at, professionally speaking? And third, what are you not so good at? I like plain English. I think interviews where you put a bunch of long words and a bunch of long questions in, it's bad. Short questions, plain English. What are your career goals? And tell me more. You're asking them a lot of follow-up questions. These aren't the only questions you ask in the whole interview, but this is the framework. It's what are your career goals? What are you really good at? And tell me some examples. You're good at selling new accounts. What are some of your best stories of selling new accounts? And you want to give them a chance to put their best foot forward. Third, what are you not as good at? Or I like to say sometimes, or what are some of the things you just don't like to do professionally? That's question 3. Question 4 is really, I only ask it, and I encourage you to only ask it if the person knocks your socks off with their answers to questions 1 through 3. If you're basically concluding, wow, I would love to have this person on my team by the time you're done with question 3, then ask them question 4. This is your final quality check. Who were your last 5 bosses? And what do you think they'll say about you? I try to ham it up a little, we're not going to do reference checks right now, because people sometimes say, well, 5 bosses, but this is our first interview, I'm not ready for references. It's no, don't worry. You don't even have to tell me their full names. Just tell me their first name. But of the last 5 people you worked with, what do you think they'll say about you when we get a chance to talk with them if we advance to the reference phase of this process? And for those of you who've seen our top grading work, you know that is a form of torque. And torque, my friends, stands for threat of reference check. And it's a truth serum for BSers. Because if you say, here, watch the difference between the regular way of asking this question. Hey, Craig, what are your weakness areas? What might Craig say are some of his weakness areas that people admit to in an interview?
I work too hard.
He works too hard. You're a perfectionist. Actually, I had a guy look me in the eye once and say, my biggest weakness is just my intense drive to achieve superior results. Perfectionist, hardworking, intensely driven people. These are some serious weakness areas. But if you ask them the question the following way, you know, hey, if I get a chance to talk with some of your past bosses, what do you think they'll say about you? It's an entirely different answer because the threat of reference check kicks in. And I love it when they give me the eye flutter stutter step move when you're interviewing them, and they kind of go, they're about to hit you with intensely driven to achieve superior results, and then they're like, slow down. Wait, did he say when he talks to my bosses? Ooh. And then you get like wide eyes, and you get staring up, and then you get the arm crossed. Then you get my favorite one, which is talking through the vice grip, where they don't want to let the truth out, but it just might slip between their fingers. So they actually, if you see changes in body language, you know you're getting something good. You're onto something. I think change in body language, to me, signals you're talking about something worth talking about. So stay there. So if you see change in body language, stay there. So what they're going to tell you is, basically, they're going to say like how well they did with their last 5 bosses. What you want to look for is people who, shocking, make their bosses really happy. People who are highly rated by their previous bosses. And then when you say, and they say, oh yeah, my current boss, he'd give me a 10. You might ask a drill down question like, oh, a 10 out of 10, wow. Why? What is it that you do that you think your current boss values so highly? And then they'll tell you what they're really good at, or what their guess is what the boss will say. It's great. I love that question. I added it about 5 years ago after a guy came through. I was about to reveal his real name, but we have home viewers out there, and I don't want Jay to feel bad. When I actually flew him in, spent money, put him up at a hotel, had him interview with my people, and I realized, darn it, Jay's a horrible candidate, and I could have figured it out on the phone screen without wasting $3,000 and 2 days of my people's time. And the issue was this guy just got into fights with people all the time and got fired as a result of it. And I could have picked it up if I had asked that question. This one question will save you $3,000 and 2 days of your people's time, I guarantee you. Because the Jay guy would have answered this question if I said, hey, I'm going to talk to your bosses. How high will they rate your performance? Or what do you think they'll say about you? I would have gotten, well, Geoff, look, I've had some good accomplishments in my career, but that last boss, he'd probably give me a 4. But it's not me. And then I love it when they discredit the witness. He was crazy, alcoholic, maniac, womanizer, bastard of a human. His mom hated him. And then they tell you why, it wasn't them, it was the boss. But as they're going through their bosses, you get a sense that, my rule of thumb is if you see more than about 1 in 5 bosses really hating your candidate's guts, that's a bad sign. I am now going to tell you how to do the best interview in the history of the world. And it was like, it's mostly my father, his interview, the top grading interview he invented in like 1904, I think it was. I'm just kidding, Dad, if you're watching, you weren't born in 1904. It's been around for like 30 years, 40 years. This is the mother of all interviews. We refeatured it. It's in Top Grading. We refeatured it in Who, just because it's that good. It's the whole purpose. Okay, watch this. Your screening interview. You're on the phone. This is like a half-hour interview. You do it with like 5 people, 8 people, and this is you. I'm talking mostly to the members and the senior staff here. This is like a hire you're making. It matters. It counts. You're personally doing the screening. For more junior level hires, whoever's the hiring manager for that role is doing exactly the same thing, but it's probably not you. So just to be clear, I want you spending full time, all the time on making sure your hires are right under you, and then rolling this process down so that the folks use the same exact process for hiring folks under them. All steps are the same. The time's a little shorter, obviously. If you're betting your company on a big COO hire or something, you're going to spend more time than if you're hiring your 25th call center worker, but the process is actually the same exact process. That said, you've done a screening interview. Now you got like 4 candidates. You're like, God, I really like these 4 candidates. What do I do now? Well, what you do now is you do the top grading interview. And the way this works, you're going to not like what I'm about to tell you, but it's good for you. This is a 3+ hour interview in your busy entrepreneur lives where, you got a million things going on. I hear you. I feel your pain. I think if you get hiring decisions right, you will have more time, not less. I want you to have more time, not less. I want you to have more time, not less. And I'm still asking you to spend 3 hours with your finalist candidates. Finalist candidates, you got to spend 3 hours. You don't spend 3 hours, you're going to make a 50% hiring mistakes. You spend 3 hours, it's going to bump up closer to 90% success if you use all these other steps. But anyway, here's how this works. You basically sit down with the person and say, oh yeah, you want to use intense curiosity. People ask me all the time, what's the mode you're in when you're interviewing someone? Like, should you be like selling them on the job or really like, cards close to the vest, or like how should you act in an interview? How you should act in an interview is with intense curiosity. Like, you're David, right? You want to send the signal like, David, other people didn't make it to this round. You made it to this round. I am dying to hear your story. And it's not like that dramatic, but let me see if I can do it exactly, tone correctly. It's more like, we got to take it down just a little bit. It's more like this. Like, David, I really enjoyed talking to you on the phone. And by the way, we did those phone interviews with 20 candidates, and we're only asking 2 people to come in and visit the headquarters. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your career. Do you have time next week? We have openings on Thursday and Friday to come in for a few hours. And he goes, yeah, sure, it sounds good. So you've already warned him a little bit that you're going to do, you're going to talk about his career. He comes in, he sits down. The top grading interviews is really simple. I'm going to tell you the simple structure. Getting great at it and picking up the nuance, I got to tell you some more tricks of the trade, but it's on the next page for those of you who would like to follow along. All right, so this is a great interview that you're gonna like freak out if you've never done one of these interviews, and you do one, and then you realize how much you actually know about a person in only 3 hours. It's unbelievable. You will get about 500 useful data points from a person in an interview like this versus like 20 data points in a normal short interview. So here's how it goes. You just simply, I like to start them, I start them actually farther back than we suggest you all do. I do like, you can't ask people where they were born. You actually can't. That's not legal. You can ask them, where'd you grow up? You could say like, where'd you grow up? You can't ask them where they're born. Can't ask them, where'd you grow up? Where'd you grow up? What were some early influences in your life? Like, what was going on? Just set the stage. Where are you from? I kind of like to start there, and you get this wonderful swath through the early years with the siblings and the parents, and dad was a construction worker, and mom had an advertising business, and I hate mom for this reason, and I love dad for this, and my sister always called me, the crazy kid, and here's why. And I love all that. I mean, I think it's cool to talk about. If you feel comfortable sitting down with a stranger and talking about their childhood, by all means, go for it. I do. I like it. But if you're kind of like many people who aren't comfortable talking about a stranger's childhood, start in school, like high school, college. What were some big high points and accomplishments you were most proud of from high school and college? And what were some low points? Highs, lows. Everything in this interview is the extremes. Extreme highs, extreme lows. So that's the first, so education. High and low points for high school, university, and graduate school if applicable. You're only spending 5 minutes on that. So it's not a lot of time. People will want to talk more about it, but just move on. Here's the real guts of the top grading interview. It's asking them about their entire career by asking the following 5 questions for each job they've had. And I'll demonstrate for you what it looks like here in a moment. The 5 questions are, 1, what were you hired to do? So I back up. Let's say we just talked about your high school, college, now you have your first job and it's selling copiers or something like that. And I go, great, okay, so what were you hired to do? Oh, you're at Xerox there selling copiers. And you say, well, I was hired to open up the St. Louis market for Xerox. They didn't have a branch here, and that was my job. And I might ask him a follow-up question like, well, what were the goals, or what was the plan for what you'd accomplish in that first year in this job? And he tells you, yeah, sell like 10 big corporate clients and $1 million worth of copiers. All right, so you're trying to find out, what were you hired to do? Second, you ask, what did you accomplish in that job that you were most proud of? And all these words, by the way, for over a decade, I've been wordsmithing, and we've been changing them and fine-tuning. Listen to how this comes off. It's again, this intense curiosity. It's like, what did you accomplish in that job that you were really proud of? And what you want is, you want big accomplishments. You want to hear what they did, how they did it, measure it, write it down. Okay, so he's supposed to sell $1 million. So how'd you do? And he sold 200,000. And you go, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, never let them see you disapprove of an answer. If you blow that and you go, 200K, thought your goal was $1 million, big guy. Boy, that wasn't very good. Yeah, like it's a rapport killer. Your best friend in this particular type of interview is strong rapport. And to keep strong rapport, you want to be intensely curious, whether they're talking about accomplishments or mistakes they made. You don't want to signal approval and disapproval as much as you want to signal like interest and reflect back. Like, oh, it sounds like you're really proud because that year you sold $1.5 million on the goal of 1.0, so you beat your goal. And he says, yeah, beat my goal. I got chairman's award for my region. It was great. That year was great. So you want to and then when he says, no, I came up short, you say, oh, okay, so you came up short. What was challenging about that job? And you try to find out. He can tell you why you came up short. But you're really looking for accomplishments and low points. The next question, same job, is who'd you work for? What was their name? Note the stage tactic. When he says, do you remember did you ever have a real job before you're an entrepreneur? Like back, you? Nope, this guy, my friend in front. Yeah, Kevin, yeah, did you have a job like out of college or anything like? And what was your first boss's name, you remember? David. What's his last name, do you remember? How do you spell Nolke? Nolke. Got it. That's how you ask this question. You say, oh yeah, what was your boss's name? And then he tells you, you whip out a pen and you write it down. Now you ask the question, if I get a chance to talk to David Nolke at some time, what do you think he'll say it was like working with you? And wow, how powerful is that? He told me the boss's name, I wrote it down, he sees that I wrote it down, I look up from my paper and ask him, so if I get a chance to talk with David Nolke, what do you think he'll say about you? And it's funny too how people just act around the thought of like actually having you do reference checks. Generally, high performers are fine with it. Like, yeah, I can still keep in touch with David, I can connect you. I think what he'll say is I was good at this, not as good at that point. They'll tell you a lot of information. A players actually will give you a bunch of negatives along with the strengths, so that's okay, that's good actually. The B players will kind of act like, well, David Nolke, I don't know where he is. I think it'd be very, very difficult for you to try to find him. And the C players, it's like, oh, David's dead. Certain you won't find David. Don't even try. Please don't try. Please don't try. So you're torquing them, threat of reference check. They're telling you what the boss would say. It's interesting stuff. It's very interesting. Picture this. Can you imagine how much better at hiring you'd be if you knew what every boss both would say, according to Kevin, and actually does say, because you do some reference checks. I mean, every boss commenting on this person, or, I don't know, 5 or 7 bosses, like, there's no mystery at that point. Like, you're going to know what Kevin's good at and what he's not so good at, and then at that point, later you can score him on the scorecard. So I love the torque. Oh yeah, the last question on each job is, why'd you leave? And man, boy, is that one telling. That's Jack Welch's favorite interview question, by the way. If any of you saw that yellow book, Winning, in it, he says his favorite interview question is, tell me why you left that job. And what he and I are aligned on this is if you hear a story of someone getting pulled to something better. I left the job because my biggest customer hired me and offered me more, and it was a bigger job, and I'd been at my previous one for 5 years and it was time for a change, and so yeah, I got pulled up to something better. You want to see that. You want to see pull to something better when people change jobs. You just do. It's highly correlated with future job success. If people happen to be doing so well, they're getting like found out in the marketplace, and the marketplace rewards them by pulling them to something better. Push is something you got to listen for that's bad. So if someone gets pushed out of a job, try to it's a little bit tricky while you're actually interviewing someone. But maybe when you go back and look at your notes, try to figure out, okay, 6 jobs. That one was a pull, push. Now, how bad a push was that? Recent push, bad. High magnitude push, bad. Frequent pushes, bad. if someone's getting pushed out of more about 1 in 5 jobs, like there's something they're doing wrong. Like they're either hard to work with, or they're lazy, or they don't get their numbers, or whatever it is. But so watch out. Listen for push-pull. It's a hint we put in the book, and that'll be very telling. If you will feel good, and you will have good success if you're hiring people who generally aren't getting pushed out of their jobs, like they're getting pulled to better things. This one guy, I remember, got pushed out of a job, but he didn't. Oh yeah, they don't want to tell you they got pushed out either. So pull's easy. My biggest customer hired me. Push is harder to get out of the person. So like in this one case, this candidate, head of sales, could have been your head of sales, balloon company, sitting there. He was like Mr. Canned Answer guy too, which throws up a red flag for me. I don't like canned answers. I like authentic conversational people, not the like really rigid. This guy, I asked him, so why'd you leave that job? And he kind of like stiffens, arms crossed, legs crossed, loses eye contact, talks through the hand, the vice grip of truth, where he's trying not to let the truth out. He's trying not to let the truth out. And he kind of like adjusts in his chair and he says, well, I left that job because I had a difference of opinion about the strategy of the company with the CEO. And a casual interviewer might have bought that and moved on to the next question. But I smelled something funny. So I said, oh yeah, playing dumb is perfectly good in interviews too. So I said, well, I played dumb. What was it? He said, difference of opinion, like what? Like what? And you repeat what they said. Oh, a difference of opinion, like what? Or, oh, the strategy, like CEO wanted to do something different from what you did. Like tell me that story. And now you're into it. Now this is good stuff because you're coming down a level. I had to come down 2 levels before I got the real answer. And the real answer was this guy actually slapped the CEO. Slap the CEO. Slapping the CEO. Oh, my client was pleased. Yeah, my day job's running this management assessment firm. We evaluate people for really expensive jobs. And my client was about to pay a lot of money to have this person be his head of sales. And I told him the story. And the story was that apparently what happened, and I got this from the candidate. The candidate told me the story. This is the power of this process. Candidate, I'm like, difference of opinion? He's like, yeah, well, it all kind of came to a head at this board meeting. And I'm like, tell me the story. And he said, well, my numbers weren't great that quarter. We're at the board meeting. I'm there. The CEO's there, the investors, the other board members, and the CEO said something like, and if we don't improve our Q3 sales numbers, we're going to have to find ourselves a new head of sales. And like kind of was jabbing me in the ribs like that. And I was like, okay, so now we know why your mom named you what she did, is what the candidate told the CEO, whose name was Richard, who didn't go by the formal full Richard, but went by the nickname part. And this is, now I'm dying on the inside, but I got to do my interview. My interviewer face was like, oh, really? Oh, so you said that. What happened next? And I'm like writing this down, and I'm dying on the inside. And literally what happened, the CEO didn't like the comment, called a timeout on the meeting. They took a break. My candidate, the salesperson, went back to his office. The CEO came into the office and said, I really didn't appreciate the comment, and frankly, your numbers stink. Why don't you just clear out your office? You're fired. To which my candidate apparently told the CEO, you know what your problem is? No one's ever put you in your place. To which apparently the CEO made the tactical error of saying, I don't know who's going to put me in my place. What's he going to do? Meanwhile, I've got knowledge on the candidate whose highlight from high school was leading, true story, leading his hockey league in penalty minutes. Which I'm very proud of to report. So it was easy. I had the rapport with the candidate, and he knew I knew that story, and this CEO's lipping off to him, and I said, so what'd you do? And he goes, I hit him. and I said, what kind of a hit was it? And he kind of showed me it was like one of these, which I think it's actually called a pimp slap. It's It's commonly mistaken for the other one, which I won't repeat, but that's the other kind. This open-handed man-on-man slap is called a pimp slap. And so, can you imagine the red mark on the CEO's face when he goes back into the board meeting? Guess we need to get a new head of sales. So, your candidates, they won't tell you that. That's why rapport is important. These questions, you have to ask them just as I wrote them, and then kind of drill down, you'll get the answers. I'll show you this. We're done at 4. All right. We're going to do this in 5 minutes. You'll get the cadence, then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on sell. Would Brad please come on down? Big round of applause, please. Here we go. Thanks. All right, I need can you give me a mic, please, for Brad? Sorry. Let's have a seat. Here's the deal. Brad was nominated by his peers to sit. Nominated by his peers and coerced by me to sit in this seat. It's so important just to kind of get the ebb and flow of how these go. We'll just do this for 5 minutes, but if I were interviewing Brad about a job, oh yeah, I have to write notes. You have to write notes too in job interviews, because if you don't, you won't remember stuff and you won't be able to score the person well later. All right, so just to give you a sense for how this kind of goes. So we picked a job. We haven't rehearsed this, but what were you hired to do in that job?
I was hired to be a sales representative in a 2-state area.
Got it. And selling what to who?
We were selling financial services to the enterprise market.
So financial services to companies as opposed to individuals. All right, what were a couple of the accomplishments you're most proud of in that job? What was the biggest one that you felt most proud of that you got done there?
For 5 years straight, I was on the President's Club, which meant I exceeded my goal by more than 110%.
Awesome. So 5 years, 110% at least exceeding. And how many people of your peers would have been at that level?
There were 26 sales reps and anywhere from 5 to 7.
Yeah, so only 5 to 7 out of the 26 would have achieved that level. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna skip around here. Usually you kind of hang out more on each of these things. We'll go to, how about low points on that job? What was a mistake or something that didn't go so well in that job?
One of the things that I struggled with was we had a lot of weekly reports that we had to do, which was just a written report to summarize every single call we made.
Yes.
And I hated doing those reports.
The monotony of just filling them out every week.
So getting them turned in by Friday at 5 o'clock was a challenge.
What was your boss's name in that job?
Bill.
Bill. And what was his last name?
Scagnelli.
Can you spell that for me, please?
Scagnelli.
Got it. All right, and let's see. So I'm skipping through here. Let's assume I'm asking you what Bill would say about you, what you'd say about him on the team. Was this a management job or just an individual contributor job?
Well, I actually was promoted. I was hired as an individual contributor and promoted to a manager.
Got it. All right. And how did you leave that job? Was it the promotion to the manager role?
Yes, and then I was recruited away from the company by another company.
And tell me about the recruiting away part. How did that go, or why did the other company hire you?
I had a company that was located in St. Louis, Missouri, that had recruited me for a position. I'd worked with them as a customer, and they were looking for someone to head up their sales organization.
So you had previously built some relationship with them as a customer, and they said, hey, why don't you come over here and work for us? Excellent. Great. Brad Pittenger, big round of applause. You're hired. Thank you so much. I'll take that. So what did you just see about the cadence or the tone that you observed? That's actually fairly true to form. That's how I interview people. And that's so what did you notice about it? Yes, sir, right here. Conversational, yep. What do you think up there?
Conversational, he was at ease.
Yeah. His being at ease is key. Key. You need the rapport. Rapport gets you data. Data gets you the right hiring decision. I'll point out, he gave me so I'm proud of just one little judo move I put in there. I don't know if you saw it. It was where he was like, he was like President's Club. And then I said, well, what percent of your peer group was in President's Club? I actually had an Oracle sales manager tell me, I made President's Club. I said, what are you proud of? He said, making President's Club. Presidente Club Ola. Moi. And he didn't say it just like that, but that was kind of his attitude. He's like, I made President's Club. And I asked him like what percent of his peer group made President's Club that year, and he said about 90%. So I concluded that my candidate was in the top 90% of his peer group. So that's why I asked, and it's good. If he's like 1 or 5 or 6 out of 26, that's this is some advanced stuff I'm about to give you. This is how to make sense of accomplishments. It's the 3 Ps. I'm going to give you 3 Ps. I'm going to give you selling, and we're going to walk out. I'm not walking anywhere, but I will stand here ending this program. Do you need to do any final wrap-up when we're done, or can we just end it? All right, I'm going to end 2 minutes to 4. Back to Craig. But this is really good, important for you to know about how to make sense of accomplishments, because people will tell you things and you don't know if that's good or bad. Think about the 3 Ps. Ask any one of these questions. I got you on peers. How'd you do versus peers? Peers. It's peers, plan, and previous year. Those are the 3 Ps. Peers. How'd you do relative to your peer group? And if he, as he did in the top 10 or 20%, that's great. Hiring people who do in the top 10 to 20% of their peer group is a really good thing. Do that. Finding out someone's accomplishment, put them roughly in the middle to bottom quartile, that doesn't augur well for their A player rating. Peers. Plan is the second one. So if Kevin says hey, I did 1.2 in revenue. Well, what was the plan that year? Well, if the plan was $6 million, it's horrible performance. If the plan was $200K, he's a rock star. You have to triangulate in and calibrate what good means. So versus plan is the second P. The third P is versus previous year, which I think for sales roles is really good to know too. But it's just basically someone says, I sold 80 accounts. And I like to say, well, what'd the person who's in that job before you sell? Well, they sold 30 accounts. All right, so you did much better than they did. Or, the person before me sold 200 accounts. You have no idea if they sold 80 accounts. Is that good or bad? Well, what was the previous year before you were there? So versus peers, versus plan, versus previous year are 3 fabulous ways to calibrate on an accomplishment. And that is pretty much that on select. It's just the 4 interviews. The screening interview is the thing you do on the phone. The top grading interview is the one you do in person for 3 hours. There are 2 other interviews. They're easy. I'll just tell you what they are. I won't go through them. The focused interview is the thing you get your colleagues to do. So if David's the hiring manager and these are his colleagues, David's doing the top grading interview because it's his hire. But he doesn't want to be the only person weighing in. So he says hey Andy, can you take the top 2 questions on the scorecard, those first 2 outcomes about growing revenue with new clients, and Jim, why don't you take growing revenue with current or existing clients, and then you're the CFO of this quartet. Why don't you find out about was he good at doing paperwork and budgeting and accurate forecasts and that kind of thing? And this is kind of cool. Now you get the benefit of having more data on specific drill down areas that you wouldn't have had. What you don't want to do is just send people through interviews where everyone's asking the same question. That's a waste of time. So that's what the focused interview does, is it just basically has each of your colleagues focus on some aspect of the scorecard and ask questions like getting new clients. How good are you at it? What are your best examples of doing it? Where have you struggled? Let's just obsess on that one area and talk about it. The last interview is just the reference interview. I have nothing new to add on that. It's the same reference interview many of you do. If you're making a key hire, you personally should do 7 reference interviews. That's the number. 20 minutes, 7 interviews. It'll take you a day. Big deal. You will be able to calibrate better the little risk areas that popped up. Brad, where are you? Not loving the paperwork. Does Brad love paperwork? Maybe Brad doesn't love the paperwork. I've identified a potential risk, but I don't know the magnitude of that risk, frankly, until I talk to a couple bosses or peers or colleagues. So that's what I think the role of the reference interview is put some magnitude on the risk. I can read your mind. You will say, but Geoff, what about companies that don't let you do reference interviews? How in the world, am I on the right track? How in the world do we get this data? Okay, I'll answer that question now. You basically get your candidate to call the reference and say, hey, can you please be a reference? Would you be willing to take a call from Geoff? He's my new potential boss. If the reference says no, then you can't. But if they say sure, by having the candidate call the reference, a lot of the time, even people who work at companies that prevent them from doing reference checks, they'll say, well, we're not really supposed to, but if Geoff wants to call me on a Saturday, I can do like a personal reference. Personal, like it's just semantics. It's like, okay, like that's legal, that's fine. That's, the person's not. And by the way, the risk isn't on you as the hiring manager or even on the person. It's just solely on the reference giver. So you don't have any legal exposure there. They do. So, on occasion, past bosses don't want to talk, fine. Or if it's their current boss, obviously you can't talk to the current boss, right? So don't talk to the current boss. But if, John, who is the previous boss, who is at that company, who left and is over at XYZ company, is willing to be a reference, call John. I think that's fine. That's all you're going to get from me on references, because I've got one last item to hit, and then we're done. And I'm returning it back to Craig, which is selling. Selling's super easy. I can do selling in a minute or less. It's the fourth of the final step in the four-step process. Just don't stop once you've decided who to hire. You have to sell through the finish line, if you will. We asked all these captains of industry, how do you sell candidates you want to hire? And they told us a bunch of advice. Randy and I sorted it down into 5 checklist things that you should just keep in mind as you're trying to sell someone. Checklist item 1 is fit. It's the 5 Fs. We got the 4 S's, the 5 Fs. Okay. So fit is sell the person on, here's how you fit here, period. That's the number one thing that makes someone want to join your company. The number one thing is they fit, their talents, their interests fit what you need. That's the thing to really sell if you're going to sell anything. Second is family. No, you're not supposed to ask women if they're pregnant. That's not what family means. Don't ever do that, let alone in a job interview. You can't ask men about if they're planning to have more kids or adopt. You can't ask family questions like that. Here's a question you can ask. It's just basically like, hey, is whoever is important to you supportive of you joining my company? And if they say, actually, now that you mention it, this is a true story, a mistake I made, because I didn't ask this question. We gave an offer to a guy who was getting married. He got married. We sent champagne to their honeymoon room. These people drank our champagne. And then when they got back from the honeymoon, the guy called and said, I want to come join your company, but my new wife, who you didn't even check in with, Geoff, because you're not smart enough to figure this out yet, because you didn't do this part for your book research yet, so you're going to make this mistake. And it was painful, because we wanted to open up Texas. This guy was fantastic. His spouse said, no way. So he had a very cushy corporate job. He stayed there. We were out. It was ugly. So our lesson learned was make sure there's no family risk just right there that you're not even addressing. Third, I really like the third one, which is freedom. For this demographic, this generation, people want to have the freedom to make decisions, emphasize how, despite popular wisdom that entrepreneurs are micromanagers, we will, in fact, let you make decisions in this job and you have freedom. Fortune just means be clear about what someone can make in the way of income, salary, any kind of stock appreciation. Don't be vague about it, be as clear as you can be. People find comfort in clarity. So when you hire someone, you might actually not be offering them a fortune, but at least if you're clear about what they can make there, they might take the job versus if you're not clear. So fortune's that. And the last one is just fun. Think about what's fun about your business on a day-to-day basis. Emphasize that. Those are the 5 Fs of selling. And in conclusion, I couldn't be more thrilled to be here with you all today, sharing the insights from this method. I hope it was helpful to you all, and I thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you.